Hey, I am Jem. It is my pleasure to be with you today. I hope that you are extraordinarily well and that life is treating you as good as it possibly can right now. So today I'm joining you to have a bit of fun with the Summer Fun collection. And I've chosen to work with the Summer Citrus Bead kit, which is absolutely beautiful. Now, not everybody's into cocktails with alcohol in, but you can have just as much fun with alcohol-free cocktails. And over the years, I've made for bars and for friends and for wall decor. I'm just going to show you a couple of things that date back about 5 years. So that one, I don't know if you can see that. That's a mojito. And we have a ruby woo or a ruby woo woo. So today we're going to work with the Summer Citrus, which is so beautiful. And I couldn't help but make a pair of earrings for myself with those. It's the first thing I saw when I opened the box was these super cool little, I mean, it's kiwi fruit slices. They are gorgeous. Absolutely love this whole collection. Such fun to work with. So I'm just going to leave that up in the top corner so you can gaze upon the beauty. And these are the projects that you will learn the basics of today. You can go at it really quite extensively with a double walled glass. This is a little bit like, I suppose, a gin balloon or a fairly classic cocktail glass. You can obviously make whatever shaped glass you want. Go for a big red wine balloon if you fancy it. You do your style. We've got lots of options to work with within each of these kits. The citrus is absolutely beautiful. So what I'm going to do is show you how to make the form of the glasses to begin with, and then we'll take a look at how we can add some extra detail to them. But they are absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous beads to work with. So I want to talk to you very quickly about the materials that I'm going to be using. First up is my main wire. So I'm using about 14 inches of a silver coloured copper wire. This is in your 16 gauge, 1.25 millimeters if you're on my side of the pond. And it's really delightful to work with. It's like a German style wire. You can use pretty much anything you want. You will find that it's a little bit more, it has a higher strength rather than using the 18 gauge or the 1 millimeter, which means it will last longer, especially if you're going to size it down and make cute martini earrings, which is just a project that I'm going to be playing around with over the weekend because it's getting to that kind of season. It's getting to the time of year when I fancy having a little bit more fun and colour in my jewellery. So that's for another day. I'll probably put that one up on YouTube in a little while. So what I'm going to show you is how to create this kind of project. And then a little bit later, I'll guide you through the first few steps if you wanted to take it up a level and add a little bit of wire weaving. Now, I will be working with only round silvered copper wire. It makes it really super accessible for everyone. You can absolutely make these in the square wire if you prefer. So as ever, the more respect you show your wire, the more likely it is to be kind to you in return. So this is about 14 inches of 16 gauge. I'm using silver coloured. And what we start with is by finding the centre of that stretch of wire. I'm going to be using my bent chain nose pliers. Any flat facing pliers with a reasonably sharp point to them will do. The key is that they're two flat faces coming together. Now, just to one side of the absolute center, I'm going to start by popping a little bend in the wire coming back, which is going to be one side of the base of that glass. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I'm going to do this in a slightly uncomfortable way because I want you to be able to see the process rather than it be super easy. So I'm going to pop those pliers back in and just try to sharpen up those a little bit as we go along. So getting some really good strong wire means that the design will last much longer for you. And once you've got that nice little, it's almost like a paper clip there at the bottom, what we're going to do is just kind of draw that down so it's reasonably flat down at the base there. Now, putting a little bit of heat into the wire like so, I'm going to start by drawing that back on itself. Now, if I show you a piece that I've half made, So this would be the design that we could fill in with some wire weaving if you wanted to. Or you could go for a single skinned glass like this. So this is the bend we're going to form now. You can use a pen or a small mandrel if you prefer, but I actually quite like to just flip that on its side, grip a hold of that base, put some warmth into the wire just by very, very gently rubbing that a little bit, and then draw it back around to create the stem of your glass. Obviously, if you are going to make something more like a highball glass, you don't have to worry about the stem quite so much. But this project is absolutely perfect for the summer fun bead boxes that just really said cocktails to me. When I opened the box, I think they're so much fun and they are really beautiful quality. So I flipped the design over and I'm just going to create the exact same curve on the opposite side. Now you can spend as much time as you want to making that perfectly symmetrical, and it can take a little bit of time and a little bit of practice to get the wire to do exactly what you want it to. So I'm just going to use my pliers to help me gain that shape. All the while I want to make sure that I'm keeping this base super flat down at the bottom. You imagine that's got to stand up on the table or the bar. You kind of want to replicate that in your designs. So again, a little bit more heat into that wire. And I'm just going to start by drawing that around to become the balloon side of the glass. And you can make whatever shape glass you want. I had meant to find out my American bar cocktail book, but I ended up getting distracted by shiny, shiny beads, which I think is something that you can relate to. So what I'm going to do is the same thing on the other side, just putting a little bit of warmth into the wire. Now, if you wanted to practice this, you absolutely could practice that in an 18 gauge wire, which is equivalent to 1mm gauge. And that would be just slightly more responsive to you. Now, in terms of size, that will really dictate whether you're going to wear this as jewelry or have this on the wall or put it above the bar, or even better, can you imagine having a cocktail recipe list with individual cocktails made up in these designs? That would be so much fun, and then people could just choose from that. If you have a home bar, or if you have a bar as a business, or if you just want to play with wire like I do literally every day. Now, there are two variations that we can work with, and I'll just pop those into the view for a second. You've got a single skinned glass here. And then we've got the double skinned glass, which has got that little bit of zigzag weaving. Now, right down at the bottom of this one, I've really heavily filled that section. And that's because you have the two ends coming together right down here at the bottom. On the single skinned glass, which is what I'm going to show you the full project for today, on the single skinned glass, you start in the middle, so there are no joins. So I'm going to show you this to begin with. I'll just pop this back over to the side. So I bring my piece that we're just working on into position. I'm going to grab in my round nose pliers, and I will show you how to just create a nice stable form which you can fill with all kinds of fun cocktail sticks and fruits and ice cubes. There are some amazing beads in this kit which are just so much like ice cubes. They are absolutely gorgeous, really beautiful, and they've got like an AB finish to them, so they glisten in the light. Absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to come up to the top where I want the rim to appear, and I'm just going to turn that wire back round to create a loop. I don't want it to be overly fussy. I just want a little loop to come around on those round nose pliers, and then I'm going to trim away the excess like so. And then I just need to make sure that everything is completely flat. Every bend that I'm making with this design is as if everything is between two panes of glass. It's all completely flat. So I'm going to give that a gentle squeeze, just so. Push that into position. And make sure that's nice and sturdy. Now, as I say, when you're working on this design at home, what you will probably want to do is take a little bit more time. You could even do an exact measurement. I'm going to kind of estimate where the rim of my wine glass will be, or my cocktail glass, whatever kind of glass you want to use. And I'm just going to turn that around on itself until those are at approximately the same kind of distance up from the stem. So again, I'm going to use my flush cutters to just trim away that excess. And then because that loop was ever so slightly larger, I'm just going to close that up slightly. And then the same process, which is to give that a squish. Like so. So you have the option to hammer this form now. You could pop that onto a steel block and then just give that some really quite gentle tapping if you wanted to, or you could really go for it and smash that completely flat. What I'm going to do today is just squeeze my pliers, the flat faces rather, of the pliers over the surface repeatedly. And what I'm doing is I'm just getting a little bit of strength to seal that shape. Wire, once you've warmed it, can be quite responsive and it will want to kind of do what you're asking it to. And sometimes you can accidentally ask it to do a thing and you don't really want it to do that thing. So that's really how simple it is to make quite an easy to fill cocktail glass. What I will show you next is how to make some of these cocktail sticks. They're filled with fruit and ice and fun. They're really, really beautiful. But the first thing that I wanted to chat to you about before I show you how to do it is how very much I got out of my one single bead box. So that's my Summer Fun, Summer Citrus collection. Both of these were made from the one box. And I also made a lovely long cherry stirring stick. I made a jeweled straw, a drinking straw. Cherries on a straw, which is really, really fun. And there were lots of these absolutely glorious, sparkling red faceted beads. They are so pretty, which made a really lovely straw. Or it could be a cocktail stick. It's entirely up to you. Another little design there, and yet another one. And then there was this one as well, because basically endless. So I'm going to pop those back out of the way for now. And we'll get cracking on some of those designs. So for the next section, I would be looking to use some little offcuts of 18 gauge or 1mm wire. You can use slightly heavier wire if you wanted to. I think actually I've accidentally grabbed the slightly heavier wire. It's not important really. I will just cut some from the reel just here. You don't need a huge amount of the 18 gauge or 1mm to get some lovely work done. So this is all still from that first bead box. This is my second sample here. It's completely untouched, apart from the fact that I pulled the tape off the side. So I'm just going to pop out some of these, and I think we'll do a fruity stick to begin with. And then onto that fruity stick, we might add an ice cube or two. So there are a couple of different ways that you can finish these. Again, key is to be respectful of the wire, and then it will be respectful back to you. So there's a minor kink in my wire just here. Again, this is all round wire. There's no special profiles that you need. You can make this with the square wire if you'd like to, but it is not essential. So think about what kind of order you want to pop your design together. So I'm going to pop a couple of ice cubes there on the bottom, and then I'm not quite sure, maybe this is a melon ball. We're going to have a slice of lemon and a slice of lime. You could put more ice on the top if you wanted to, but for me, I really like how that looks. I'm thinking about how fresh and fruity my cocktail would be with ice and that beautiful fresh sliced fruit. And oh, it's actually not a lime, it's a kiwi. My bad, very, very many apologies. So for this design, I want to top that with a little bow design, and also to kind of give the idea of a drinking straw. So I'm going to leave a couple of inches at the top. That's about 3 inches. And I'm going to put a really sharp bend on the wire coming back down on itself. I'm going to put a little dressing bow. One of the joys of being a barkeep is how much fun you can have dressing your cocktails. It's like being a chef. You get the opportunity to present things. So, oops, my ice cubes have fallen off the end. Oh no, put a little bend on there for now. I'm going to draw the wire around my round nose pliers to make the first half of that bow, like so. And then I'm going to give that a squeeze just to make sure that I'm happy that that's nice and strongly shaped. So on the other side, I'm going to make another curve around my round nose pliers. I'll bring that back into the center. And you can see that the pliers are just on the edge of the central line there. So I'm going to take the end of that wire and draw it back down across the center. It's not going to stay there, but that just gives you the opportunity to see if the little bow design you're making is symmetrical. It may not bother you whether it's symmetrical or not, but I would quite like it to be. Then I'm going to come back in with my bent chain nose pliers and push that up at the top so that that comes away following that same central line. I'm going to give that a bit of a squeeze, and then just make sure that I'm happy with how that's looking. As I do so, making sure that that's nice and strong, I'm just going to tilt the wire ever so slightly off in one direction. And then I'm going to put another very sharp bend at the top. Now this next bend needs to be under half the distance that you have remaining. So I've got maybe 1.5 inches here. So I'm using just under half of that, push over the top, make quite a nice strong bend in the wire. And you can take a second just to get that good and sharp before you pop the end of your chain nose pliers in again, and then draw the tail of the wire back down the stem of the design. So I'm going to give that a really good squeeze up at the top because it looks fine to me. So I want to settle that. And then I'm going to trim away the excess. Now with wire, you get one opportunity to cut it. So I always measure and look more than once before I make that snip. It's quite dispiriting when you snip the wrong bit. So always take your time. And you can tell when somebody's working with wire if it's stressing them out because it will show. Just go with the flow. Wire itself is not enormously expensive. And what's the worst thing? You know, if you make a tiny mistake, then you choose to use that as you've learned from it. It was a learning process. You went through that and you come out the other side a better wire worker. So there's the top of my straw and bow. So I'm just going to bring that fruit back up and I'm going to add back on that naughty ice cube that escaped from me. Now down at the bottom of my straw design, what I think I want to do is put a coil, not because the bottoms of straws have coils, not usually anyway. I remember they were very popular in the 1980s when I was a child. You could have curly straws, but they were not very good to clean. The reason I'm going to put a coil on the bottom of my straw is that it means we can tie it to the frame of our glass really neatly. It's a nice design. So I think I want about maybe 1.5 inches of wire remaining. And this size of offcut is more than enough to make another drink stick. So don't throw that away, keep it to one side. So what I'm going to do next is come and make a coil on the bottom of my drinking straw, my fruity drinking straw. And it needs to be in the same orientation as the straw at the top. Otherwise, things will start to come out in a 3D fashion on your cocktail glass, which I don't know, maybe you want that, but I don't particularly want that today. So always be mindful when we're using glass or crystal beads on wire, because any bead has the capacity to shatter. And glass is delicate in its nature. So we're going to very, very carefully protect those beads. I'm going to cover those with my fingers and I'm going to make sure that when I start my coil, I'm going in the same orientation. So again, I'll just get that coil started. It needs to be quite a nice open coil. That needs to be as if it's between 2 panes of glass. So that's on the flat like so. So I'm moving on to my flat facing pliers, in this instance, some bent chain nose pliers. I'm going to very carefully generate a coil coming up towards those glass or crystal beads. And I want that coil to be slightly open so that it gives me an opportunity to add some threading wire. Now you can see I haven't gone completely up to those beads with the coil because that could be a little bit dangerous. I'm just going to turn the wire back like so and then finish the coil off. And you've got yourself a lovely little bead stick. Well, this one's technically drinking straw. Or it could be, it's entirely up to you. You can make that exactly how you see fit. So you can see already how these things are going to start layering up with all the multiple choices that you have with all the beads that have come in this one single pot. There's lots of ways that you can utilize these. I'm going to show you another couple of examples of the little sticks that will go on the cocktail. But before I move on to that, I want to show you a little bit more about how you can make a double walled drinks cup, or glass, I suppose is probably the better word. So that's what we would be looking to create. So I've halfway through one, and I just want to show you the second side. So what we've got here is almost exactly the same way we started with the first design, which I just have here. So we started in the middle, we created the base of the glass, and then we came back in to create the stem all the way up to the top. So I'm just going to repeat that step now. We've created the stem, we're getting some lovely warmth into the wire to bring that up and around. I'm going to try and keep that relatively symmetrical to the other side. So rather than creating a little loop at this stage, what I'm going to do is push that wire back on itself again in 2 dimensions, always in 2 dimensions with this design. So you can see that we're just getting a little bit of a sharp point up at the top. I will give that a very gentle squeeze, but I don't want to completely close it up. And then I will draw the wire back down on itself. Let's put some warmth into that, and it will be a little bit more polite to us. There's a slight kink in this piece. This again, as I said earlier, is quite a heavy wire. It's 16 gauge. You could practice with 18 gauge if you prefer. So what we're going to do is chase the design we created on the way up, and draw that all the way back down, trying to keep it train track like, tram lines, so that it's the similar sort of distance all the way along. And because we warmed that wire, we can ask it to do things that you can't with cold wire. So I'm just going to play with that until it sits how I want it to. That looks pretty good to me. So this is the trickiest part of doing the double skinned glass. So I'm just going to put my finger into that neck section or stem section and just push that around. Now you will see it's quite a tight bend, so you might prefer to come in with some pliers just to get that kind of racetrack hairpin to make sure that that fits in with your design. And if you need to make minor alterations as you go, so be it. You want this to be absolutely wonderful. You want to be happy when you look at it, rather than rush through it, come to a design and think, well, actually that wasn't as perfect as I would have liked, but now I've put all the work of weaving into it, I don't really want to undo it. And you'll look at it forever thinking, I wish I'd taken 2 more seconds to make that bend a little bit happier. So again, with this section at the bottom, coming back over the base of the glass, I've warmed the wire so I can pull the end around. And you'll see with my non-dominant hand, I'm gripping that central section really firmly. So drawing that back over the top until it sits underneath the base of the glass. Now you don't have to have 2 lines coming back on each other, but it makes a really strong base of the design, and I'll show you how to do that if you wish to. You could just cut them both off and put little curls on there. I'm just going to push the wire so that it sits neatly across the base, get a good sharp turn at the base there, straighten that across the bottom, and then trim away. And again, always measure twice, 3 times even. Put your cutters into position before you snip and make sure it's the correct wire, because it can be quite heartbreaking. Not so much if you've only spent a couple of minutes bringing something together, but if you've spent a couple of hours doing it, it can be rather difficult to add more wire in. So that's how we create the double skinned frame. And I have a small amount of 26 gauge round silvered coloured wire. Silvered is how I refer to it in the UK, meaning it has had an application of silver over the surface. Silvered copper. It's exactly the same as silver plated wire. You can use silver colour because if you're not going to have this touching the skin, it's really not important. You can even use wire that you've extracted from cabling and the such if you want to be super thrifty and efficient and environmentally friendly. So I'm going to show you a very small section of how to add the weaving in at the top of the glass here. I tend to start up at the top third or so. If you imagine that this is where we're measuring from, I start around about here. And what I would do is I would push some of my 26 gauge or 0.4 wire in between those two tram lines. So you can see that's come between those two lines there. And I'm going to wrap 3 times on one side. So around the inner of those two tram lines once. You can do whatever number of wraps makes you happy, whatever you think rather looks appealing. So as I'm coiling, I'm tightening that up as I go to give a really nice machined effect. And then a third time down the center with the end of my wire, push that down into position. Now, if you wish to, you can give that a very delicate help just to get neatly coiled up. Now, that finer gauge wire has come down between the two sides of the wine glass side. And I'm going to draw it up and around the outside now. So down between and then up around the outside. And I'm going to zigzag this design so that it's nice and open and allows the light to shine through. So I'm wrapping 3 times around the outer of those two tram lines. And it just happens by posting the end of that 26 gauge or 0.4 millimeter down through the center. I've wrapped 3 times on the outside. The wire has come down between them. So I'm going to draw that back up. The lines that you can see across the middle of those tram lines are zigzagging. So I'll show you one more of those. One. And then a second one. And then a third one. When you get all the way up to the top of your design, let's imagine that that's taken us to the top, leave a little bit of a gap right at the top here. I'm going to trim away on the rear side of the design. If this was going to be worn as jewellery, you may wish to trim between those two tram lines. This for me is going to go on the wall, so I'm not overly worried about it getting caught on skin. And what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that those last 3 coils are super and neat and tidy. Now, the reason I've left a gap over the top is so that you can add an ice line. And this has got some really funky ice on this one. I don't know what the colour of these beads is called, but I absolutely love them. And all I've done is I've taken one of those little scrap bits of that 18 gauge or 1 millimeter silver coloured round wire, and I've just laid that across the top, and that's what gives the rigidity to our single layered glass shape. So you can do this in whatever order you fancy. I'll just pop this one up and out the way. Hopefully you can see enough. The light is very tricky here in the UK today. It keeps going from very bright to very dark very suddenly without any warning whatsoever. So if I show you how to put some ice at the top of your glass, which is, you know, sometimes it floats, sometimes it doesn't. I think we're going to have one of those large chunks and a small one. Let's see if we can get a small one for the other side. There we go. Pop those beads back out of the way. Now what I would do is just trim away any ends. Because I'm using scrap pieces of wire here, I don't want any nasty sharpness, so I'm just going to trim one of those ends away. I'm going to put a bend on this just about that far from the end. Now that far in millimeters is about 6 millimeters, so I guess that would be probably a 1/4 inch, something like that. So what I need to do now is turn a loop on the end. So round nose pliers to the rescue. It needs to be quite a small loop, but still needs to have enough space to fit inside the glass loops that we've made at the top there. So I'm going to put some lovely work hardening into that to begin with. I've created a loop on the end of my wire to begin with. I want that to be nice and straight. And I also want it to be nice and straight because I'm going to be putting some beads onto it. So be more respectful of your beads with wire if it's super straight to begin with. So I'm going to open the loop up that we've just created, and opening a loop like this is much the same as opening a jump ring. You'll want to take that open sideways like so. And what we're going to do is attach that into the loops that we made at the top of the glass. And if things would like to stay still, we're going to close that loop into position. Now you might need a couple of attempts to get that looking nice and neat and tidy. Just get that closed up and secure. And you can see what we're going to do. We're going to create a bar over the top of your cocktail glass. So I think we can probably get one of these beautiful rondelle shapes, one of these absolutely fabulous massive cube shapes over the top, and then another one of the faceted rondelles over the surface. So that fits really neatly, and to me it's kind of reminiscent of floating ice in the top of a beautiful, could be alcohol-free cocktail. Now I can see the size of the wire that I now need. What I want to do next is to create another identical loop. I'm just going to look to see, I want the loop cut to be on the far side away from me. So where my finger is, on that side. So I'm going to hold this really firmly. And again, being super respectful of any beads, we're going to come quite close to that bead and draw a shape, sorry, an angle coming away from me so that we can close that up on the other side in exactly the same fashion. So again, we're going to trim to around about 6 millimeters or around about 1/4 of an inch. And then we'll pop another loop on the end. Now this is a moment that you'll want to just take your time to ensure that you don't stress the bead out. So I'm protecting the bead with my hand, and then I'm using my round nose pliers like so to generate a loop. Now before I open and close my loop, I want to work hard on it in the shape I want it to stay in for the rest of its days. So again, be respectful of those beads, and then open and close, plop, 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 like so. And then open up. Just need to give that a bit of sideways torsion there to get that to fit into the hole. It does go in and it gives you that wonderful snicked noise to let you know it's closed. And then close that up like so. Give that a squeeze and you can see that my pliers are never actually touching the beads. So that's how we've added an ice line to our cocktail. So I hope that you're enjoying how this is coming along so far. And I also hope you can see how unique you can make your individual cocktails. You can make them to a specific recipe if you want to, or you can have that in just some sort of fantasy cocktail design. It's entirely up to you. So I kind of like adding a slice of watermelon into this very citrus celebration drink that we've got going on here. So I will show you now another design on making the accoutrements that go in your cocktail glass, your summer celebrations or your citrus celebrations. So if I pop some of these up to the top for a moment, we'll make another little design. And I think probably one of these fancy straws would be cool. Let me see, I think I need a few more of the teeny tiny beads. So I'm just going to empty these into a box. And we're going to, oh yes, these are lovely. These little spacers are absolutely perfect for channel setting to make a glorious, glorious drinking straw, perhaps, with even more fruit loaded at the top. So I'll just show you 3 of those. And to make that, you will need some more of your 1 millimeter or 18 gauge wire, which I'm just going to grab off the reel. And I'm going to be using probably around about 8 to 9 inches, just to make sure that I don't struggle for space. So I'm going to give that a squish and a squeeze to make sure it's nice and straight to begin with. And around about halfway along, and again, this is round silver coloured copper wire. I'm going to put a really sharp bend around halfway along. Doesn't matter if it's not exactly halfway. And then I'm going to make the base of that straw. So the channel that I'm creating here needs to be wide enough to house the beads you wish to use. So for me, it needs to be wide enough to pop those little beautiful, glorious spacers into. So what we will do is just make sure that both of those sides are nice and straight. And I'm just going to splay those ends out, just like so. And just to begin with, for the channel setting, I want to make sure that that shape is exactly the right dimension for what I need. Give that a little bit of work hardening. I'm also going to make sure that those turns at the bottom are really sharp. Now, one way that you can achieve that in wire work is by going past the point at which you want that bend to occur. So do the same on the other side and then draw it back. And you'll find that you get a much more defined sharpness to the bend at the base. You kind of want it to look like a drinking straw, and they've got fairly sharp bases. So again, we will then be using a little bit more of the 26 gauge 0.4mm wire, and I'm just going to use a scrappy offcut. I've got a very short length here. If you want to add in lots of glitz and glam to your fruity straw, you will need to have quite a considerable length more than I'm using. I'm just using an offcut for you to show you the technique. To set all of those, you probably want about 14 inches or so of the 26 gauge or 0.4mm wire. So if I pop that back up at the top for a second, I'm just going to smooth the end into position. Now, to begin with, what I want to do is chat to you very quickly about channel setting. Not the same channel setting as you might have seen in other wire work. This is the art of setting a drilled bead on the upper side of a channel that you create between just two lengths of wire. So these two are joined together at the bottom, and I've put around about an inch over the top. And what I'm going to do is tie that around one side of the base of my glitzy drinking straw. So I'm going to take that all the way around, and I would probably just go for 3 or 4 times, just making sure that that's nice and neat. If you want to do another variation, obviously the world is your oyster. You can do that as many times as you want. But what I would say is you need at least 3 or 4 to make that nice and secure. We don't want it coming unraveled and beads escaping. So I've just tightened those coils up slightly. I'm going to draw that down close to the base of my straw. Now at this point, if there are any sticky outy bits, you probably will have found them with your fingertip like I just did. So it happens to the best of us at all the time. So what I'm going to do is just draw my plier faces over that coil in the same rotation as I've coiled the wire to make sure that it's nice and flat and smooth. So my fine wire is coming over the top of both sides. So we're not doing a zigzag like we did earlier to fill the top of the glass. As you see here, this is zigzagged or basket weave. It goes down the center and around. You're always going on to opposite sides. With channel setting in this fashion, there are various different ways you can channel set. With this one, I want that wire to go over the top of both of them. I'm going to add in the first of my beautiful glitzy drinking straw beads. I'm going to allow that to sit in the channel we've created. So we want there to be enough space for the bead to completely fit. Now let's see if I can get this thing to focus higher up. Close. So wires come over the top. There we go. And what I want to do is wrap that 3 times around the outside of the opposing wire. So 1 and 2 and 3, draw that around. Now you can see that those coils are really, really loose. So I'm going to draw them together really carefully with the tips of the pliers now. And this is a cool trick to use, is you put the tips of the pliers, one on the left-hand side of the wire and one on the right-hand side. So they go diagonally opposite like that. And then you swap the other way, and then you can neaten up the coils without crushing anything too much. The wire is now passing underneath the straw that we've created. So what I want to do is have a pass of just wire on the back. Not only does this help to elevate the beads that you're channel setting, but it helps to keep the design nice and secure. I'm just going to open that out ever so slightly, draw the wire around what is currently the lower of my 2 channels, my 2 tram lines rather, 1, 2 and 3, get that neat and tidy. And then what we need to do is pop that second bead into position. And then I will show you how to attach your accoutrements to the cocktail glass. Allow that to zip down into position. And if you like the idea of having wall art, which is fun and interesting and perhaps related to things you're passionate about, if you like ice cream, then please do join me on the summer camp on the first full week of August, where I'll be showing you how to do a beautiful ice cream decal. You can wear it as jewellery if you want to, but it'd be fantastic on the wall. That's 1 and 2 and 3. So the beads are suspended on a pass of wire that sits over the top of the design. If I show you the underside, it's just a plain pass of wire underneath. And if I pop this over to one side now, I will show you what that looks like when it's completed. So hopefully you can see that the beads are suspended more highly on the surface of the design, so you get lots of lovely glister and glamour. Can't speak today. So to create the next part of that design, once you have filled that with as many of those beautiful glassy straw design beads as you like, we would bring that quite close together so that it closes up. And I'm going to trim away the shorter of these two sides, like so. Again, that's probably useful enough to make another little pass over the top, so don't ever throw those away. And then where I've got to the top of the straw, I'm going to come in with the bent chain nose pliers, push that away, and we're going to make another one of those bow designs. I really like them. I think they're ever so pretty on cocktails. So we've got quite a sharp bend coming back down, and then I'm going to run the round nose pliers around. Let me just bring that up slightly higher. Sorry about that. Draw the wire back across. And then you're going to do the same thing in the opposite direction so that you get a lovely bow shape like so. You've got that bow shape going on. Pop the bent chain nose pliers in again and bring the straight line up. Now you could fill that with even more glist and the glamour at the top, so you could have a straw full of sparkle, or you could do as I've done with one of the other pieces, add a few more beads on. Let's just see what we can find. Oh yes, I think we're going to add some of these absolutely fabulous design beads. Have I picked up the wrong one? Yeah, they won't go on. Let's have one of these. I'm going to have a fruity, it's almost like a sorbet colour. And then we can add whatever we fancy at the top. You could have more straw if you wanted to, or just another beautiful bow. What I'm going to show you now is how to create the top like this, which would be like a cocktail sword. That's what I call them. I don't know what they're actually called. So what we're going to do is generate a lovely circular form at the top there, like so. And then pop your round nose pliers, bent chain nose pliers in at the top, draw that back on itself really, really sharply. Now you'll probably want to do this in a couple of steps. It's not just because the camera's here. You'll probably want to do this in a couple of stages. So the wire, you've got your loop on the end, and you actually want that to come really, really close back on itself, but very, very small movements are the way to go there. You don't want to ruin anything. So to get this next shape started, I'm going to put the round nose pliers back in the form I've created, and then use the other side of the round nose pliers to start that form. Once I've got the start of the shape, I will remove them from the first hole and then draw this background on itself. So you get another loop created, and then repeat the step. So we're going to draw that back really sharply on itself. I don't think I've left myself enough quite to finish that off. So we're just going to do that with a heart shape on the top instead there. So just manipulate that until it sits exactly how you want it to. Give it a bit of a squeeze and then work harden to ensure that that's nice and secure for you. Now, the next thing that I need to do is to show you how to bring all of these bits and pieces that you've created together. And it really is ever so simple. I need some more of my 26 gauge or 0.4 millimeter gauge wire. And all really we're ever doing with wire work is tying things together as neatly as we possibly can. So I'm going to take my glass that we made together earlier on with the floating ice cubes, and I just need to tie the beautiful fruit and ice cube straw into position. So I like the look of them going off to one side, and also that gives us the opportunity to hide those little loops on the top, which are more of a physical help to us. You would struggle to drink out of a glass that was actually shaped like that. So we're going to cover those up with one of these sticks that we've created. So you see the loops at the bottom. What I'm going to do is find a central section of that loop, and I'm just going to wrap 3 times with some of my 0.4 or 26 gauge wire. If I put this up out of the way for a second, 1, and I'm just going around the outside of the absolute bottom of the coil that we made on the fruity straw or the fruity stick. So I've wrapped 3 times around the base here. I'm just going to flip that over because it's easier for me to see and pop that into position. Now, dependent on the shape of glass that you've made will really define where you want that to sit. Obviously, sitting it over the surface of the glass will create a physical impossibility. We don't want that. So I want that to sit inside the base middle of my glass. So what we're going to do now is just literally tie these 2 components together. You could basket weave if you prefer, but what I like to do is I'm going to wrap 3 times around both the loop at the bottom that we just worked with, that little coil, and that outside framework of the glass. So we've got 1, 2 wraps and a 3rd wrap now. Push that into position, and then you've got the choice about where you want to take this tail of wire. Slightly more fiddly, but slightly more neat, is to take it onto the coil in the middle. So that's what we'll do. The wires come around the outside. So I'm going to take that underneath and push that up inside that last little bit of loop. What you can do if you're working with a shorter length of wire is just push the middle section gently through. You don't want to do that too many times because you will work harden and therefore make brittle the wire that you want to keep strong. So again, I'm just going to wrap for a 2nd time. And if you find this tricky, you can always use a pair of pliers. Now grip gently to bring that into position. You don't want to over work that wire too much. You don't want it to snap. So if that's tricky, you can open up the coil that you made ever so slightly. And I'm going to go for a 3rd time. Just inside that little loop, if I can get the wire in. If I can't, no great shakes, because 2 wraps would be enough. I'm just going to support the wire with my thumbnail, draw that all the way around, push that through. So again, this for me is wall decor, so I'm just going to trim away at the end there, keeping that little section of wire for our next job. Take that tail of wire away and give that a squeeze. So on the rear side here, we need to again take the other end of the stick that we made. I just push that up through for a 2nd, pull that nice and firmly into position, and then trim the correct wire away. And you're firmly attached to the base. Now, obviously, there is some movement there, but once we've added that in at the top, there won't be any more movement. Now, dependent on how long you made your fruity cocktail stick or your drinking straw or whatever it is that you've made, will depend on whereabouts you can actually attach that. So I think I can probably just get in at the top here. If the top was too high to attach to the framework of the glass that we've made, what you can do is run some of that 26 gauge a little bit lower down and just use that to attach instead. Basically entirely up to you. I think I can get in at the top there. So I'm going to take one of those bits of the 26 gauge and I'm going to wrap it 3 times around the top of my drinking stick. Sometimes you need to just lose a little bit of wire, so I'm going to take a tail and I'm going to wrap. I think I might go for a 4th time actually, because this will be a single-ended deal. And I'm going to sacrifice this little bit of wire now. Normally, I'm incredibly thrifty and I like to keep all of the bits and bobs. Sometimes it's just easier. You just need to sacrifice a little 1/2 inch of wire here and there. If you're working with sterling silver, perhaps you might like to measure it before you make it. So pushing the base of the stick back into position, I'm then going to see whereabouts I can add this to the glass itself, the glass framework. So if I flip that over, like so, I think the best place for this is going to be inside the loop of the glass that we made at the top there. So I'm going to support that where I want it to sit, bring that ice stick out of the way, and then I'm going to go 3 times with the tail of that 0.4 or 26 gauge, and I'm going to add that onto the glass itself. So forgive me for flicking that round. Hopefully you can see what it is I'm doing. Attaching onto the framework to take that last one through for the 3rd time, grab that tail and pull it through, and then trim away. What will happen with your 26 gauge, the stuff I have in my cutters now, is that the more times you use it, the more brittle it becomes. So at some point that becomes scrap and not a spare part. So again, you would just make sure that your ends are tidied away neatly, chase the wire around that central core, Give that a bit of a squeeze just to make sure it's all neat and tidy. And that's the basis of the whole design. You can just layer that up however you fancy it. So that's probably a little bit tall for this glass. I might put that one in a Collins glass. That one looks a little bit like a sword, to be honest, which, yes. You can put those however you fancy. You can even have them going across the top of the glass if you want to make something a little bit more decorative. So those are your basic cocktail ideas for your citrus celebration. What I've done on this one, just as a last moment, is I've added a hanging loop. And what I've done with just a scrap of the 18 gauge, very, very simply, on one end, I've created a loop. I'm going to work hard on that loop really firmly, give that a squeeze, bent chain nose pliers in to create a straight line with a loop on the end, and then exactly the same on the other end. Now I'm going to hold that really firmly in between my flat facing pliers, draw the wire back, get that out of the way, and then create that second loop. So round and around with the round nose pliers, take the tail over the top. Looks a bit like a cartoon dog's bone at this stage. Trim away the excess like so, and then work harden by squishing between your flat facing pliers. And then you can just open up your design. Let's go for this one. So this one will probably hang fairly symmetrically. It's reasonably evenly weighted. With the ones that have pieces going off to the side, you might need to hang from an asymmetric position. Show you what I mean with this one. The hanging point is over on one side because there's more weight on one side. I added more bits and bobs on that side, and it hangs at a jaunty angle. You can't see it from above, but there it kind of hangs at a jaunty angle, which I sometimes hang at a jaunty angle if I have too many cocktails. So I'm going to open up the loop on one side, and then I'm going to pop that on the ice holding bar that we made at the top, and just draw that around before I close that up, and we are done. There we go. So lots of different things that you can do. I hope that you've enjoyed that as much as I have, and I hope that the light here in the UK hasn't been too tricky today. What do you think? Let me know. Do you enjoy them? Do you want to see more? Do you want to see different designs? Give me a shout. You can find me on Gem Hawks Designer. I'll pop my page link in the comments a little bit later on this evening. Getting a little bit warm in my studio this afternoon. It's almost 5 o'clock here in the UK. I'm guessing that's coming up to lunchtime for you on the East Coast. So I hope that whatever it is that you're doing today, you have an absolutely amazing time. Can't tell you how much fun I've had with these. Can't tell you how excited I am to be back with you for the summer camp in the first week of August. I'll be with you on the Monday morning, I believe. I could be wrong. I've slept since then. I haven't looked at my schedule today. But do feel free to drop me a message or tag me in the comments below if there's anything that didn't make sense, or if there's anything that you want to chat about jewellery wise, or if there's anything that you'd like to request for future demonstrations, just let me know. Whew. So I can't actually see any of your comments at the moment because I'm not in Facebook. I am in a call meeting system. So I can't answer anything right at this very stage, but as I say, do just drop me a message later and we'll take it from there. I have got to show you the little earrings that I made though. I'm just going to pop that down here. They are so cute. Kiwi cocktail and a big slice of lemon. The world's simplest make, but I love them and they're perfect for summer. So you don't have to be a wire worker to have a great time with this fabulous bead mix. I've borrowed a few from this, but there's so many in there. It is just a huge amount of fun. When these were named, they were named accurately. So I'll show you which collection we've used today. It's the Jessie James Summer Fun Collection, Summer Citrus. And when I opened the bead box and saw these fabulous little I guess like Kilner jar cocktails. I desperately wanted to make cocktails. I'll show you again very, very quickly some historical ones. This is a mojito that comes from about 2017, I want to say. Around about 2017, 2018. And then there's the Ruby Woo Woo. And these hang in bars or wherever you fancy them, really. These particular ones actually hang in my hallway because I love them. But like I say, give me a shout if there's anything that I can help you with. I hope you've enjoyed today. And I hope that the rest of your day is absolutely fantastic. I just need to check if Sarah's still there, if she's got anything that she'd like to add.
I'm still here, and this was fabulous, Jem. Thank you so much. You are so talented and such a bright light. Thank you.
For sure.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, guys. So, hi, everyone.
There she is.
I told Jem to just let it rip this morning so that we could be full on design, but I've been here in the wings just watching along and commenting with you all. So thank you everyone for joining in this morning for this wonderful tutorial with Jem. We've got more to come on Thursdays at the 11 o'clock hour between Facebook pre-recorded premieres and these live tutorials. So please do drop a line with anything you'd like to see, with questions, comments. Find Jem on Facebook. I did drop a link for her Facebook page there. She's on YouTube. She's fabulous. Jem, thank you so much for today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to hang out and to play with these absolutely stunning beads.
Oh, you are so sweet. Well, you have, oh, here, I'll put us on, on gallery view. Have a wonderful evening, Jem, and everyone that's been tuning in. Have a great Thursday. This is a wonderful, wonderful early kickoff to our weekend.
Take care.
Bye now.